Hi all, welcome. We're going to be starting a series here on LitBlock that we're calling Back to Basics. And the reason that we're having this Back to Basics series is because there's so much going on in our teaching life right now. And we want to find spaces of simplicity. We want to find things that we just have in our back pocket to make teaching just a little bit easier. So today I wanted to talk to you about planning an interactive read aloud. So we know that read aloud is one of the healthiest things for any reader to experience, and grown-ups and kids alike benefit from listening to books being read to them. That's why Audible does so well. So today I just wanted to talk to you about one process that I like to follow in order to plan out for my interactive read alouds. Now, we can read aloud to kids at any time, at any age, with any type of book. It's just a wonderful experience. And then there's also, so that's like our read aloud, but then there's also an interactive read aloud, or sometimes called an intentional read aloud. And I wanted to share with you a little bit more about an interactive read aloud and a simple way to plan for it, and then just use it to support comprehension skills. So planning an interactive read aloud first begins with the intent to use the read aloud for a specific purpose. It's not just, which is a beautiful reason, but it's not just for enjoying the book and learning something from it or getting to know a character. It's also to practice a comprehension skill that can be tricky when they're doing all of the other things that readers, that are required of readers. So an interactive read aloud kind of isolates a skill and maybe a strategy to practice. We take away the decoding and the fluency. We're doing that heavy lifting as teachers, and we're giving kids the chance to practice some of that comprehension thinking. Of course, we want this to transfer eventually to their own reading. For now, I want to share a 3-step process with you for planning an interactive read aloud. So first, what we want to do is we want to pick a focus. In that focus, it's going to be something that we feel like kids might be having some difficulty in, or might need some extra support, or something new. So we'll pick a focus, and then we're going to mark up a place in the text where we can show how to use that strategy through a think aloud. That's when we as the teacher are saying, here's my thoughts. This is what's happening in my mind. And that gives kids a chance to try it themselves so they can see our reading process. So I like to mark spots for a think aloud of that focus. And then I like to mark spots where kids can turn and talk and practice that focus area. So first step, pick. Second step, mark up places for the teacher think aloud. And then third, mark places where students can turn and talk, either in partnerships or in trios. So I have this lovely book here, Woof, The Truth About Dogs by Annette Whipple. Really fun book from Ray Craft Books, which if you haven't heard of Ray Craft Books, definitely give them a follow. They are giving voices to authors and illustrators who are underrepresented in publishing. Woof, The Truth About Dogs is obviously, you could probably tell right by the cover, a beautiful piece of nonfiction or informational text. And so I'm just imagining that one of the tricky parts for students when they're reading informational text is synthesizing all of the information that is on just a single page spread. I can also see us needing to think about synthesizing information across time too. But you know what? I'm going to pick one focus today for my interactive read aloud, and that is to synthesize all of the information that comes on one page spread. So I have a little strategy on how to do that. So we can first read words, then read the images. Basically, we're looking and studying the images to find out what information they're teaching us, and then to name out loud what I'm learning. So that's my focus for today. So I've done step one, I've picked my focus. Step two now is I'm just going to take a sticky note, and as I read the book, I'm going to pick places where I'm going to model that strategy. That will be my think aloud. So I simply go into the book and I do a little bit of reading. Like, whose tail is this? The wagging tail, the sniffing snout, the happy bark. Dogs are the most popular pet in the world, but dogs chew our shoes, bark too loud, and slobber on everything. Well, that's an intro. And you know what? I feel like that's not the best place for my think aloud for this particular strategy. So when I'm reading it to students, I might just read it out loud and we may not do any discussion around it. We'll simply read the introduction, where on this page, there seems to be a lot more opportunity to be able to gather information from the entire page spread. This page spread is why are puppies born with closed eyes? And there's some beautiful images that we can look for information. Look at the puppies here. And then there's also words that I can read for information. So I'm simply going to mark up, this is where I'm going to do my think aloud. And I simply put, it's probably could go with a smaller post-it, TA for think aloud. And I mark it right in the book. So when I'm reading aloud to students, I just have a couple of pre-planned places that I know that I can stop and model the strategy that I'm focusing on. Then I might find another spot for a think aloud, depending on what I can hear students are able to do. You know that feeling, right? Like, you know, when students are ready to try something themselves. I know that that's not a very scientific type of teaching suggestion, but we all have our teacher spidey sense, and we know when it just feels right to give kids the chance to try. Sometimes it's even before we do a think aloud. Maybe they just need the strategy. Sometimes it's after we do a think aloud. Sometimes it's after we do 2 think alouds. I turn the page, and do dogs have feelings? Well, right there with all of those images and the words that are there, this could be either a think aloud or a turn and talk, depending on the situation. So as I'm reading it, I sometimes mark up spaces that could be either, or places that could be either in the book. So in this case, I'm saying this might be a think aloud or a turn and talk, whichever one I feel at the time makes sense. And then I turn the page and I decide, is this one that I want to use for a think aloud? Or is this one that I want to use for a turn and talk? And then or I might not use that for anything. That might not be the page that I want to practice that on. But for now, I'm just going to write down on this, how do dogs communicate? I'm going to make that a turn and talk, where we're practicing the strategy. So that's it. That's how I plan my interactive read aloud. First, I pick a focus, strategy. Then I mark the places that I'm going to show that strategy and how I use that strategy. And then I'm going to mark places where students are going to practice in conversation. I know I'm saying turn and talk, that could be jots too. It could be jot and talk. It can be talk and jot. It could be think and jot. But it's in some way giving students the chance to practice what I focused on. And then I just mark that up in the text, just like I showed you. Let me give you one last peek here. So this is my think aloud page with the strategy that we're practicing. Now, one little further tip for you when it comes to planning an interactive read aloud, we don't need to read the whole text to practice what we're focusing on. We don't need to even be reading a new book. We could be going back to a book that we've heard already and just practicing the strategy in one section. So it's a real time saver. It's actually one of my favorite instructional tools because you get that feeling of connection and community when we're reading aloud. You've got some rich text in your hands where our brains are just like in love. And also we're practicing some reading skills. So it's a real simple way of practicing some comprehension work, and also intentionally planning some extra support for readers in whatever area you're thinking they might need. So thanks for being with me. I hope that was helpful for you, just simplifying, planning an interactive read aloud where you pick the focus, mark the places for your think aloud, and then mark the places where kids will do some work themselves, turn and talk, and so on.